Well, good evening, Galleon. This is Mayor Tom O'Leary here on another Monday night. I was joking before we went live with this that here's putting the shoe on the other foot. Oftentimes, the things we talk about on Monday, this was even true when Matt was writing for the Inquirer. Oftentimes, the things we talk about on Monday end up in the paper later. This is the shoe on the other foot. Really, a couple of, if you haven't seen Saturday's Inquirer, excellent picture of the depot and a really pretty solid article that resets the table, if you will, for potential passenger rail on the 3C and actually 4 other routes. So if you're a passenger rail person, good article, awesome picture. And we can talk tonight if some people have some questions about what I know or remember about 3C and some thoughts I have about a way to get what I call the 2C started and do it in a way that doesn't cause a galleon to be left behind in the overall planning. So that's one thing. The other item, if you've looked at or you go back and refer to the Inquirer Saturday paper, there's an article on there about the changes in venues and lifting of some of the restrictions on the number of people that you can have in various arenas, sports arenas, etc. As imagine, or at least those people who use our facilities hope that we're keeping real close tabs on how those restrictions being changed or lifted would affect our small venues here in Galleon. And so as late as this morning, we checked with the governor's rep for this area, and that has not worked its way up to the queue. So we are still, oh golly, I bet there were 5 or 6, maybe more calls today with people hoping that our temporary moratorium or our inability to rent those facilities, that was changing. Hasn't yet, but I think the article in the Inquirer gives a little bit of hope on the way. At the expense of really belaboring this, talking about last Saturday's newspaper, there's an article on here about Avita offering rapid testing. And while I don't have much to add to that, I do think it's important to note that those folks in the community are interested in vaccination, and you may have heard some things about how to get a vaccination if you aren't 65 or have any of the other qualifying conditions. What I would suggest, and we checked with the Galleon Health Department today, is to call up there and to try to get your name on the list and get registered for a pair of vaccinations, a shot or two. And after tonight, we'll post up on our Facebook site, website, the Galleon area locations that are also giving vaccinations. So I think all the things that have happened over the past year as it relates to state government, you can critique some, you can applaud some. What I would want to do is applaud the fact that the state and these local vaccination sites are working pretty closely together to get those vaccinations out. There's been, let me check this because I need my glasses. You know, you get older. There have been 6,100 vaccinations that are one shot in, at least, and up to date there have been 3,226 vaccinations completed. So, you know, that's a little less than 10% of the population. You know, I was waiting my turn until I found out you can get yourself registered in advance. So we'll get you those sites that you can contact, and my recommendation, first off, in the main, is to call the Galleon Health Department if you have any questions, and that's a 468-1075 number. So anyways, that's what I got. Andrew Carter, editor of the Inquirer, thanks for letting me rip you off tonight. Great picture. and a real solid article about the 3C, 2C, and then the other 4 passenger routes that are under discussion. So, with those 2 or 3 comments, we'll see if we have any questions and roll forward.
I do not have any questions yet. If the audience has anything, please submit now.
Okay. We'll pause here. I'll think of something to talk about. Maybe development in over the shorter long run. A couple of small things while we buy a little time to allow people to call in and get tuned in. When you're out north on Portland Way, out near the traffic light at Brant Road, you'll see on the left side at the old GE site, the old power equipment site, whatever name you attach to it, Pico 2, any event, you're beginning to see equipment assembled, and I imagine if you went trespassing on their property, you'd see the beginnings of the demolition of that building. I'm pretty excited about that. I think that it's a project that's been worked on for more than a handful of years, and a lot of twists and turns in the road, but it looks like with a combination of the investment by the local purchaser of the facility, the redeveloper, and with state investment, we're going to get that building torn down, and I have every hope and expectation that there'll be a new industrial type building constructed there that will give Galion something it hasn't had in a while, probably as you think about it, since E. Crane came to town, but that's a modern manufacturing or warehousing building that's available and ready to go for developing prospects. So, long time in the making. It's pretty cool to see it beginning to move towards demolition and reconstruction. It'll be a bit of a challenge over the latter half of this year and certainly through next year with the widening of Portland Way to accomplish the redevelopment of that property, the new highway project, and as we talked last week and have moved along a little bit in terms of if having a meeting gets you closer to the finish line, then we took a step closer to the finish line within the last week, and in that we had a meeting with some key state officials looking at funding sources and ways to get that frequently talked about. And once it's in, I think people will have great, will appreciate it maybe even a little more, but a left-hand turn lane, northbound turn lane at Branton 598. So, like I said, if meetings make things happen, then we're well on the way, because we had a meeting and a phone call. So I do know that there's some local activity in a countywide organization that called a Transportation Improvement District. Our hope here at City Hall is that they get their organizational work in place, and we're sitting on all the information we need to make an application for the funding that would be not all of, but a key part of getting that left-hand turn lane accomplished. So, anyways, that's real good news for those people who drive into town or drive out of town and wonder, when that when the old Pico property, when and if it'll ever come down. I think you're going to have to find some other subject maybe to get fixated on, because it looks like that's well on the way. Maybe the new question of the day will be, well, I wonder how many 100 people they'll get to come in there. Or for the people who see the glass half empty, it's like, well, I wonder if anyone will ever come in there. And I can remember a long time ago now that being the skepticism about Crossroads over in Bucyrus. That's turned out to produce hundreds of jobs and a whole lot of investment. So, well, this smaller park that we're talking about out there in North Portland Way may not be as big a opportunity or as big a boom. I'm enthusiastic, excited about, and I think when it's all done, we'll feel like it was worth all the effort. But that's well on its way. So, anything else we got going?
No questions at this time.
Okay, I would want to just hit one or two other topics, and then we'll kind of see how it goes. It's either I got home a week ago. My wife said I talked too much, so maybe I talked the wind right out of the sails. But in any case, there is some discussion this week. I think that after about a month ago, there was talk about how to fund the engineering for infrastructure out at the Freeze Center. There was quite a bit of discussion that went on among different interested parties. But in terms of forward movement on the project, how council is going to deal either with the infrastructure engineering requests or maybe the overall bigger issue of whether or not freeze funds will be provided. I'd forecast, if you will, that over this week and then certainly beginning next week again, that you'll have what I hope is a thorough discussion by council of all that would need to go into that project and all of the work that's been done from, gee, that's a good idea. Gosh, it seems like 5 or 6 years ago, but from that inception of the idea to where we are now, a lot has happened. And but if for those people who are jigsaw puzzle builders among us, it's a lot like a jigsaw puzzle. There are hundreds, if not 1,000 pieces in this puzzle, and it doesn't lend itself to a quick and ready solution. And so people who are skeptical on either side of the issue, that's not bad. That's probably healthy, because there are a lot of questions that need to be asked. So much like you'll be working on different pieces of that jigsaw puzzle, I'm still of the opinion that it's something that can be made to work in the community, but there are a lot of parts to the puzzle that we're still in the process of assembling. So we can talk about that. I don't want to talk in analogies entirely, but we've got the building of the facility and how we're going to fund that. We've got this infrastructure that caused things to take a little bit of a hiccup and the forward movement slowed down. And then finally, there are a lot of questions that I think, as I talk to council members and other people interested in the community about the project, a lot of questions about how the operating finances will work, where the startup capital will come from, and how how long would there be a projected operating loss, and if that is the case, then how does that get funded? So those three parts: how do you capitalize it? How do you build it, and then pay for it over? And the proposal say 20 years. How do you get $1.5 million of infrastructure? I think it's doable. This little city has built $1.5 million projects a number of times. The big project out on Portland Way is in and around 4.1, 4.2 million. So it's, it's a bigger infrastructure, certainly than the Freeze Center infrastructure. And then there's this key issue that's really not been talked about as extensively, and that is where the startup operating capital will come from, who will fund that, how that will happen, and then how do we keep the facility operating in good order and properly staffed and a high-quality operating facility as revenue from events or revenue from activity begins to come in the in-basket, and we can offset all the outflow of operating capital by increasing any kind of operating revenue. So there's been a lot of discussion about the first two items. Really, quite honestly, not a whole lot of questions, not a whole lot of detail to this point about the operating side. So, all right, I don't know if I've rattled on long enough. If you got a question, we'll go that way and see if that gets our back and forth, our dialogue going.
Sure. Have a couple questions on the Free Center, and then there were some other topics. So
Sure.
let's hit the Free Center questions first. First one came from Steve. You are aware Shelby is building a sports complex also?
Yeah, it was a good article in the News Journal. I have not seen the Shelby Globe. I think that prints a couple times a week, if it prints at all. Yeah, yeah, Steve, I saw that, and it is my short version of the answer to that is I think both facilities can coexist. I'm not sure the extent to which the Shelby facility, which is a school facility, contrasted with this, which is really, I really hope that the area schools utilize the facility if it's built, but it's not a school facility. The project that they're building over at Shelby is much more of a school facility. As a new baseball field, I say just being a wise guy and a competitor, that's about time. That field's never mind. Anyways, but it really has a lot to do with expanding and improving their high school sports facilities. How that opens up and becomes the travel facility that you hear a lot of the proponents of the Free Center emphasizing, that kind of remains to be seen. But last thing I'd say about that, Steve, is they had a windfall on that. If you read the article, you know that. I don't need to retell it to you. But when they borrowed money for some of their other improvements, the amount of money they borrowed, they thought they would have a higher interest rate. As it turns out, they had a lower rate, and they're able, with the projects done, to take some of that, if you will, extra money. The school treasurer, the superintendent here says he'll probably flip out, but extra money, and they're going to use that to get this facility up and going. So that's a large part of how they're going to finance it. I won't bother the 2 or 3 property tax school finance people that may be out there tonight, but it seems to me that these pipelines, and this is where the windfall of money has hit the Shelby School District, the pipelines aren't any different than the electric generating facilities, if you ask me. And so, it seems to me that the evaluation for the tax value of those pipelines ought to be distributed among the whole service area, not just within the districts that the pipeline's going through. But you know what? Nobody asked me, but I thought I'd just take a second or two and explain that. That's really where the money's coming from. More power to them. If the question is like, well, is that going to knock the wind out of our sails? Is it going to reduce our market? From my perspective, not really, because why I think Galleon should be using freeze funds in building a facility like's proposed is to improve access to recreational activities for people in our community. It may be, the neighboring community, the greater Galleon area or Crawford County. And I think we begin to get focused on the wrong opportunity when we talk simply about what opportunity or what growth may come about from the commercial, the travel sports opportunity. Boy, I got opportunity on the brain tonight. Just real quick, and then we'll go to that next question. I think that answers Steve's question. If you're a reader of newspapers, I'm telling you something you already know. The Spire Center, Spire Institute, I think they call themselves, up on the east side of Cleveland. They just bought a vineyard. So I don't know if the article joke said they were going to maybe make jam and wine, but it was an interesting, and the reason I bring it up is because that is a wonderful facility, but the financial operation of it's been something that's been, it's maybe not hit people's expectations. So I thought it was an unconventional source of income to buy some property next door that had been a vineyard and put that into production. So look out there at the Blackford farm. Somebody may buy that to the west there and turn it into a vineyard. But I'm not spoofing on it. my opinion about the center. We got one more freeze question. People are just way spun up about it. It's possible to do this, and there are different personalities and names attached to it. I've been at this as long as anyone, and there are ways to do it. But where I've caused some disfavor among some of the proponents is that I'm insistent on asking some of the tough questions and making sure we have as many of the variables understood and accounted for before we dive into this. And so getting it right is better than rushing into it. Getting it done in a sound way over a little longer period of time, even though I've been at it 5 or 6 years now, is in my view better than rushing forward because there's some sort of need to do it right now. I think that's the wrong path. So anyways, what's the other freeze question?
Sure. This one came from John. He said, are there possible revisions to the proposed Freeze Center? Has an 8-lane pool been in the discussions?
I would say that's my Tarzan. It's my very worst Tarzan. The consideration of an natatorium was very early in the process, and in my take on it, it wasn't real thorough. So if someone asked for a public record, we've had a lot of those here the last few days. But somebody asked for a public record saying, show me all the documentation, all the questions, all the research that was done on the cost of and square footage necessary to include an natatorium into the Freeze Center, you would get a big Zippo, because it really has not been much more than conversation. And I would say, without making people mad, because I don't really want to do that, maybe some internet research about why to have a natatorium and why not. Okay. So there wasn't a lot of consideration. I think what I would say about that is that, A, I can't swim, really a horrible swimmer, so I don't care. No, it's among of all the things you could do like this, it is one of the more expensive costs to build and ongoing cost to operate. So why it got thrown off the island in a Survivor game sense early on, it was for those two reasons. So it's not under current consideration. First part of the question, I'll go ahead and answer it different than the second part, which is, are there revisions to the building? I know it's late in the game for a lot of people, but in order to get the necessary support, it may turn out, in order to be able to afford what is the amount of money that can be raised, that there may be some revision. But I think by and large that the people who are most energized about this and who put the most time into it over the last year or year and a half, are I think fairly strongly locked into what you'll see promoted, which is basketball, volleyball on one side, court side, and then a turf side, which can be, I think it's ideal. I think it's designed around soccer, but it certainly could be constructed in a way and programmed in a way to have other turf type sports in it, from softball on one hand to 7-on-7 football, and then it'll eventually come to Galleon lacrosse, something you hear a lot about. So I don't know. I hope that answers the question. The natatorium, it's worth a fight, because I think we got a lot of money to raise, quite candidly. So if there's an advocacy, there's a group of people who want to, my big thing, since you didn't ask, I'll go ahead and answer, is to weigh in the balance a regulation indoor track. Because what's in this facility as designed and being promoted right now is more of a multi-lane walking track, but it isn't the regulation 200-meter track that you need for that indoor track which is both a high school and collegiate kind of activity. So, all right, you wouldn't be the first person. What was the name, please, again?
That was John.
John. Oh, I said, okay. Hey, John, you wouldn't be the first person that I've said no about the swimming pool, but I mean, what do I know? I mean, I think it's I think it's worth introducing, but it has. I think it's a fair summary to say that's why it was voted off the island. If again, like I said, everybody's so spun up, man. Watch out which word you say, you might get canceled. So, anyways, fire away. What else we got?
Okay.
Did that bring up more freeze questions?
Not at this time.
Because I tried to irritate people to an extent that would cause them to answer or ask a question because Matt and I are so alone sitting here. Anyways, what else we got? Something else will come up probably.
Yep. Different topic here. This one also came from John. Going back to the Pico
Yeah.
demolition. Is the mayor saying that after that building is torn down, there will be a new structure built? And are there already investors at that new building?
Yes, the investors are the is JBS, which are the initials of the three owners. Is sort of I'll get it wrong, but it's a subsidiary, a wholly owned subsidiary of JNF. So that's who it is. That's who bought it from GE. They're the investor, largely, and then the rest of the project funding come from two sources: JNF's own banking, their own wherewithal, their own credit and credibility, and then I believe it's $3.5 million forgivable loan. I don't know what. Somebody's out there saying, "Oh, Leary, what the hell is a forgivable?" I don't know what a forgivable loan is, but it is if certain employment and if you fill up the facility within a certain period of time, that the loan is converted to a grant. The city isn't privy, I guess is not the right word, maybe, but we aren't part of that project, so we understand how it is actually going to work, but it was secured with state funds. I think a lot of help from both people at City Hall and people at the Crawford Partnership in terms of introducing JBS to this program, and then they really took it from there. So the capital is coming from the state and private financing that they had to secure themselves. So where I see the city's role in, it gets to this issue of the turn lane, and what the plan is to demolish the existing building, to answer the other half of John's questions, demolish the existing building and then construct on speculation. But I have really strong feelings about what a good site this is, and so while it may not have a tenant when the footers are poured and the building starts construction, I'd be real surprised if it didn't have a commitment of a new, hopefully in an industry. My preference would be some sort of manufacturing industry, but the community's looking for new investment can't be too choosy, too picky, and that would go up in its place. So yeah, I think the short answer to the question is, yeah, the plan is demo, build a new building, bring in a new industry, let's hope, one that has the ability and interest in growing, and then the financing of that will, as I said, come from both JBS's private resources and their banking partners, and then $3.5 million from the state. So, if we had a daily paper or some way to promote that, I wouldn't have to get on here and self-promote. But we're going to bring in a bunch of horns and blow our own horn here in a couple of weeks. But yeah, that's what's going on out there. My golly, we've been talking about doing that since before I came out of retirement. So it's good to see it starting to starting to happen. All right. What else we got?
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question came from Derek.
Yeah.
He asked, is there any way a boat dock could be installed at Amix Reservoir?
Yeah, I guess I'd think for a second. I don't know of any reason why not. I'll be honest with you, Derek. I have never had the skill or the patience to fish, so it's not something that's like on the front of my attention span all the time. But yeah, we'll check into that. I think that is the kind of project which is nice to be able to do when you have something like the Freeze Foundation. So yeah, we'll take a look at that. We're getting ready to put together a list, Eric, of the freeze projects for 2021. We'll throw you in the in basket. If you are knowledgeable about those things, my friend, shoot us a message about where to look for either designs or sort of a good Google site or two that we could go see what it would cost to put in a boat dock. So yeah, we could, and we'll be the first to let you know if for some reason we're not allowed. But get us a head start on that. Run that first leg of the relay by sending us some information about where to procure and kind of the costs we're getting into, and then how that matches up with the kind of boats that we would have out there that would have that limited horsepower thing that we have. So that's what I got on that.
Okay, and then we had a suggestion come in
Yeah.
from Cindy with the skating rink at
Yeah.
Hayes this year. She suggested the city advertise it better next year, maybe have a sign put up in front of it.
Yeah, I think those are both real good ideas. I think it's interesting. It's kind of funny how things go. It was suggested by a police officer who unfortunately has taken a job elsewhere, going to do some really cool things. Not like he's going to go become a police officer somewhere else, but he has suggested that. It seemed like the first year we got it kind of late, and if I recall, last year the weather really wasn't very good. I'll be honest with you, Cindy. We're still trying to identify the staff technician that is the ice rink expert. So it continues to be trial and error. But your idea of once we get the operational kinks worked out, and you're working around weather, I think it's fairly obvious. Then yeah, I think it makes sense to promote it better. I've seen occasional things on Facebook about it, so I guess bear with us. We're learning, and we're probably always going to have a month or 6 week window in there. But when you step back and look at a lot of the things that we have in the parks, heck, baseball is 8 weeks at the most. So they have seasons, and I don't think I know that the ice rink will be similar. So yeah, promoting it better. Maybe we should charge. Wouldn't that be a swell idea? Cover our costs? Of course not. If we had the resources, the money to let everybody in the swimming pool, we'd do that, and have every intention of keeping Splash Park, no charge. So there's cost to it, but nobody wants to hear about that on a Monday in early March. So, all right, anything else? What do we got?
Okay. Yep, 2 more questions here.
All right, I better sit up and pay attention.
All right, this next one came from Tom. Let's see, what has Galleon's return on investment been on the water main going to the airport and along State Route 61 up to US 30?
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting, it's a good question. I don't know the answer to it, but I would say that one of the things that has limited its return on investment is there's not a mandatory tie-in. So we have some people out there are tied in, other people aren't tied in. And so that has a limitation on it. I think during the times that I see Galleon poised to grow, poised to stop fighting among itself, if that occasionally happens. I think it happens everywhere. But I think there is truly opportunity for growth and development along that 61 corridor. So I'd like to think over time that the development of some of that farm ground into either a commercial use, industrial use, or maybe some additional housing on that east side of town is possible. But the short answer to Tom's question is that there has not been a whole lot of sale of water that's resulted from that effort to annex and grow water customers out there. So I don't know. Maybe it's if we get the right development energy going, the right investors. Kind of back to the question before from John about the Pico area. If you get that in right mix, then I think it'll pay dividends in a big way. But it's not a huge water seller, so I'd be running and hiding under the table if it was my idea, or as a citizen, way before I had any notion that I would be mayor for a while here in town. If I had been for it and then nothing happened, I'd be, it's kind of one of those things. It's an oh whoops. It's a little bit. We had public records request today about the hotel and what a bad deal that was. It's kind of like that oh whoops. The problem is the hotel is set up better and has better guarantees for the city than that major investment did. So anyway, I won't harp on it. Not much return on investment, but I think if Galleon grows in a large way, there's more opportunity on 61 than on 598. So we spend not as much time, because we're planning a $4 million highway project in the Portland Way corridor, but we spend a fair amount of time trying to put together the parts for development and then ultimately use of that water line Tom was asking about. So.
Okay. Last question I had as of right now came from
Yeah.
Nick. He asked, when is the city going to start filling in potholes in the alleys?
I think we have every day now that we've got the snow out of the way. It's a great question, Nick. Let me give you a kiss on the cheek. Like, man, this time of year, it's pretty miserable being in a position like this, because everywhere that you didn't get paved last year looks that much worse, and potholes are popping up all over the place. So this has been between checking the banks of the Olentangy, I think we got past what I would consider generalized flooding. But that's a worry. If you looked at the Olentangy yesterday, it was filling up the banks and pushing up to the bottom of the bridges. So you have that worry. And then you start to see these potholes just coming and going, or not coming and going, because that's his question. Yeah, we're out there. I think my best advice is to call up here at 1857, 468-1857. Gives a general idea of the location, or a specific idea of the location. You would not be the first. I know of at least 2 people who called with pothole concerns or complaints, and those are just things I overheard today. So if you got a particularly bad spot, and I know that comment will probably bring in other wise guy or gal commenters like, well, yeah, there's so many, it's hard to pick out. But do us a favor and give us a heads up on that. we're collecting them and dispatching people all along. I'm not sure where Nick's talking about, but you get out there on Carter Drive, either going to and from the schools or shopping at any of those places out there. Or, that road is starting to show some fatigue, so that's been on our list for pothole patching. Let me over-answer the question, which is my habit. We're just talking this afternoon with the auditor about ways in which we can get our paving program up and running, get the funding put where it needs to be, and get the targets identified and get that localized paving done, if you will, in the first half of the season, say before the 4th of July. There's a window before all the big ODOT jobs open up and the asphalt plants are really occupied with doing a lot of that work. There's generally a little window in the spring where you can get some work in. Our goal is to try to identify those targets and get what will be a relatively modest paving program this year. I've been saying that for a year after we had real aggressive program last year. It'd be kind of small, and I think it's possible to get it fit in this year. So in the short run, if you've got some potholes, particularly bad intersection, whatever it may be, send that stuff to us. Try us out. We'll see how quickly we get there. The other half of the question that I avoided until now is alleys. I don't have a lot, unless you have a major alley that is sort of impassable, the moat of local alleyways that you can't. We're probably going to be later on getting to that. There's a couple of areas that we're going to try to do some things a little more creatively with alleys. Some people who want speed bumps, but we're probably going to build a hump to slow down some alley activity. So while some people need the holes filled, other people want holes constructed or some sort of something to slow people down. So yeah, get us your pothole targets on the main surface streets, the named streets, if you will, and hang in there till later in the season for what we're able to put together for some sort of alley program. I don't have it to the forefront of my mind, but we spent thousands of hours, I can get you the number, on alley repair last year. And it's funny, even though we dedicate a lot of work there, it's not really noticed very much. And so that's a bit of a thankless job for our service crew, but we'll be out working alleys again this year. So, did I talk long enough to get another commercial?
No, that is all
Not
the
a
questions
commercial,
I
not a
had.
question, rather. Well, here's another commercial. Read the article. I'm surprised that among the train buffs here in town, we didn't get some questions about it. I'll just briefly close by saying, excellent picture by Andrew. Really one would look great in this office, but I'm just clowning around. And then the other thing I would say is that become as informed as you can about the proposed passenger rail projects. And I think there's a way, it's not necessarily threading the needle, but there's a way to get sufficient attention attached to Galleon that if something happens along the 3C corridor, we don't get the, you're too far out in the middle of nowhere treatment. And so we're going to have to understand what our odds are to prevail, and then enlist the right people to be supportive of the project. So having said that about passenger rail, it could be a fun for people who are really interested in travel and tourism. You hear a lot about the potential that passenger rail could bring to that. I would subscribe to that. I don't want to oversell it, but I think it has some potential for Galleon if we can land it. The key thing is to make sure we have the right political environment statewide to see that as a transportation priority. So some night when you want to talk for 40 minutes about passenger rail, we'll do a live stream and see if how many people tune in for that. So, all right, with having said all that, I do appreciate you being here, and we'll keep doing this as long as we have people interested in questions that are being asked. Free Center discussion, debate, information is going to ramp up a little bit over the next few weeks, and so I think it's important that we come to a decision moving forward on that. We don't want this thing to languish, and if we're going to build it, we got to build it sooner rather than later. So, having said all of that, I appreciate you being here, and we'll talk to you next week. Good night.